Hello there beautiful, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now in today's video we're going to be talking about Reno and his brand new FR that comes along with his intersecting wills, and Ashe is also going to be joining him for the little upgrade there here and there, bit of a rework, C90 upgrades, all that kind of stuff. So if you'd like to know more about Reno, Ashe and the event that comes with them, then as always stay tuned and keep on watching. Before we get started, of course, don't forget to check out all of my social links in the description box below, including Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and Patreon, and also Instagram as well, where I am uploading lots of other photos and bits and pieces of myself, my makeup journey, my artistry, and also my FF14 shorts, which you can also start to find here on YouTube and also over on TikTok, as I'm going to start uploading things in every facet because, hey, discoverability is a thing and I'd like these things to go off over the course of time. So, hey, if you like the FF14, maybe you'll get something out of those as well. Over on Patreon, I do always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video, and today that person is going to be Six Tails, who's going to get an extra special shout out today because of their very kind generosity towards my San Diego TwitchCon goals, and they'll be getting shout outs over the course of the rest of this burst window. So for Charlotta's batch, massive thank you goes out to you. And of course they are also one of my Ultima patrons as well, and they have Garland as their title card, and it's always a pleasure to be able to draw these for you guys. So if you would like to, if you're interested perhaps in getting hold of one of these yourself and you'd like to do that, then perhaps consider clicking the link for my Patreon in the description box below. And of course don't forget to check out all the other content creators and resources out there for Dissidia Opera Omnia, because they deserve your love just as much as anybody else. Just the one banner for us to talk about today, and that banner is going to contain the following. It's going to have Reno, his LD, his brand new FR, and the rest of his kit. Charlotta's BT, if you haven't managed to get that already. And we're also going to see the return of Ashe and Alize. Alize only gets her force enhancements here, but Ashe actually gets a little bit of a rework. No new gear, but there's some nice stuff in here. So if you've played Ashe before, you'll know that her big thing is large numbers of buffs for physical and magical attack, as well as making it so that you can have paralysis off of her EX, and her LD makes it so that you get additional HP damage for a set number of turns using her Queen's Order buff and the HP attack that comes off of it. Now her rework, very simple. It's basically just HP dumps across the board. Like for her, both of her skills, additional HP attacks, 3, which is fine, like it's not really anything special, but that's not really what she's there for. Her LD also basically makes it so that she starts with her HP attack Queen's Order and the buff that comes off of her LD. So like a lot of LD reworks, she now doesn't have to use her Divine Retribution attack on the turn that she comes out. The attack itself now has additional HP dumps on it and increases the duration of Noble Oath, which is her framed buff that comes off of it. And also you get more benefits from it, which are 20% HP damage up for the party and self 30% brave consumption reduction after any HP damage. So for Ashe herself, she uses less bravery than the HP damage that she deals, in a very similar fashion to the likes of Iroha and characters like Golbert, stuff like that. You can like make use of that with Ashe as well. Her C90, her C85 and enhancements to her EX give her a recast gauge increase, which is always very welcome, and then Arc Blast and Maelstrom's Bolt will add up to a total of 6 HP dumps, and instead of paralysing just a target, you now get it for all enemies. Would I go pulling for Ashe at this moment in time? Probably not, and I should also say big shout outs to Midiu for their translations over on Reddit. Would I go pulling for Ashe right now? Honestly, no, probably not. I already have Ashe, and I think a lot of people pulled for her when she came out with her LD. But because we know that she is getting an FR and BT later down the line, thanks to JP, I don't really feel that now is the best time to be pulling for Ashe. If you get her as a byproduct of pulling for Reno, then great, but I certainly wouldn't go out of my way for her. I will say though, if you're interested in the likes of Sabin or characters that like holy damage as a part of their kit, Ashe's LD call does provide that. So if that's something you're looking for, then maybe that's worth bearing in mind. Now moving on to Reno. Reno is a very interesting character from this point on, and I'll be honest with you, when I first read about his FR, a lot of people, myself included, heavily undervalued Reno, and I will own up to my mistakes. I did undervalue him, and having seen lots of clears from various people, Nightingale is somebody that I have watched a lot of clears for with Reno, I will happily say that I was incorrect about him. The reason I will explain about why I thought of him a certain type of way, and I'm sure I wasn't the only person that thought this and undervalued him when he was released in JP at the time. So we'll start with his rework. His Electro Prod gets 3 HP dumps in it, which isn't fantastic, but being honest, you're not going to use it very often from this point onwards, if at all. So honestly, I wouldn't worry about that. Electric Dance has 4 HP dumps in it and is very helpful for having that many because it's the only attack realistically you're going to use outside of his EX's Pyramid. You're not going to use his skill 1 almost at all. His LD Pyramid now gets an additional bit of HP dump added to, or a little bit of extra HP damage, sorry, added to the debuff that comes off of it. So the Pyramid debuff, while they have it, they'll take slightly more damage. But again, not really the reason you're taking Reno. The Pyramid debuff dispels 4 buffs from all enemies and inflicts a framed, unturned debuff that makes it so they can't deal damage, can't do debuffs, anything, until they've tried to, and then they lose that debuff. So it doesn't last like Raijin's does. It's something that will disappear as soon as it's used up. And then his C85, also 4 HP dumps, and gives you Turk Light, and just gives you more Brave potency. It's honestly nothing crazy. And the reason that I've undervalued Reno is this base kit. He only really augments damage for himself in terms of like Thunder Imperil and Thunder Enchant. His debuff has Thunder Imperil in it that comes from his Numb Beat debuff, but you're probably not going to use that because his Numb debuff is an ability that after an enemy acts, they are delayed by 2 turns if they use a physical move, so ranged or melee. So let's move on to his FR. So his FR partner is Quistis. Gives AoE, triple HP dumps, inflicts Pyramid to all targets. This is really nice because it's another use of his LD if you're actually going down this road. And the Force Time asks for either a Thunder attack command. So again, if you're going to use this aspect of it, he doesn't enchant the party for Thunder, so you're going to need an outside source for that. Or when an enemy turn passes and when they use an attack that has a physical bravery attack in it. This is actually fantastic. And I will say this now, the reason I undervalued him before is because the basis of his kit originally revolved around his Numb debuff, which at this point you actively don't want to use because it is a non-bow with this FR. Because why would you want the enemy to have less turns if the FR gauge is going up because of his own FR? Now, a friend of mine actually said this to me, and I will quote this: "Don't let perfect stand in the way of good." You're not using the Numb debuff anymore. Do you know what? With the amount of percentage you can rack up from this thing, it doesn't matter. Bear in mind, Force Time doesn't go down during enemy turns. So if you're against enemies that like to take a lot of turns and you enjoy off-turn damage sort of compositions like I do, your Galoofs, your Gladios, your Cores, all of that kind of stuff, you're going to love Reno FR. And that's because you don't actually have to do anything once things have gotten going. If you wanted to use the Thunder Enchant, you probably could, because at a surface level this looks like just an upgraded version of Desh's FR. But when you really look at it, and the fact that this is the first FR we've had that activates on an opponent's turn and not yours, you can rack up serious amounts of percentage and therefore damage just by letting the opponent do what they want to do. As long as you keep yourself protected, you can use Galoof, Gladio, Core, Auron, Machina, anyone that does damage during the opponent's turn to just keep building that gauge. You can hit 999% HP damage with this thing, no problem. So long as you've built the party to counteract the fact that the enemy's going to take a lot of turns and not do it all in your 10-turn phase. There's a lot to play around with here. And as I said, I will be the first to admit that I was wrong about him when I first looked at him. So now let's take a look at Reno's intersecting wills, which you'll be pleased to know is a bit easier than DET10 and obviously Fujin's event with the super tanky dragons. So you might recognise the dragonflies from Shulk's Lost Chapter and her event back in the day. Well, there's not really any shenanigans to speak of with this particular event. The only things you'll have to really worry about, and again, big shout outs to DissidiaCompendium.com for their wonderful information here, is that as the gauge goes up, they will reduce your initial and max bravery by certain percentages, and when their force time goes off, they will do a recover from break AoE brave HP attack that does split damage, and then they reduce all HP damage they take by 200%, so realistically you're not going to be hitting them during their force time and need to protect yourself until that force time is over. You can cancel that out by using a thunder melee based force ability, Reno, and then just go from that. Apart from that, the only mechanics you have to really worry about is that at various HP thresholds, so 80, 50, 20%, and after one of them has died, they will do a instant AoE HP attack with split damage. So really, that's the only thing you have to worry about. Because they're very quick and they take a lot of turns, the idea is that you use Reno and his FR to allow them to take those turns whilst protecting yourself with the likes of Galuf, Oren, etc., with which you can actually just do duo clears of those two and Oren, and you allow them to take those damage, like throw their damage at you, and then you just return fire with massive counterattacks. Although, there is absolutely no reason why you can't take your Tidus, your Kain, your Camlanor, your Terra, your Freya, your Selfie, your Charlotta, your Cisne, all of that stuff. Anything, if you wanted to do it that way, there is absolutely nothing stopping you, provided, of course, that you keep yourself protected by way of a call ability, perhaps, like, anything like the Warrior of Light, for example. For those threshold attacks, you'll largely find that they're actually pretty easy. There's loads of clears out this that don't include Reno. I think Reno is here for a particular purpose and actually comes into his own much later on when enemies do start taking a lot of extra turns that you're not expecting, as opposed to this one where we've already got these really crazy powerful characters that you could absolutely wipe the floor with this boss with. So now let's go into Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to let your voice be heard and tell everyone whether you would pull on any given banner and why that might be the case. So as always, a massive thank you to my patrons for their votes and their comments, and it's wonderful to get all of you involved in the conversation with these weapons, etc. So if you'd like to join in, perhaps you'd like to join in with Patreon as well. Just a quick, obviously, little plug there from me. Let's go into some comments. Of the 100+ people we asked, 29% of people said they were going to use gems here, 57% of people said they were going to use 100 or more tickets, 10% of people said less than 100 tickets, and only 5% of people said no thank you. So I am in the camp of I'll use 100 or more tickets because I do still have quite a lot of tickets thanks to Charlotta being kind to me, and because I have a VT, and there's only one item I actually want on this banner, and I prefer to save my gems for banners that have multiple items that I want, for example for a brand new character. So let's go into some comments. So Alex here says, absolutely pulling, have been waiting for Reno for ages. His FR is the first one to properly encourage and boost off-turn damage, which is a completely different playstyle to the FRs that we've had so far, and it's one that I really enjoy. With so many great units able to take advantage of it, like Machina, Oren, Galuf, and some more ahead, like Kor, Yang, and Gladio, it's a safe investment for a rewarding playstyle. And yeah, I actually agree with this 100%. Like, honestly, I kind of am kicking myself a little bit for writing him off, because off-turn damage is actually my favourite style of play alongside, well, it used to be launching, then Selfie kind of ruined that. Now it's off-turn damage. So yeah, it's very within that kind of field, and I will say it again, don't let perfect stand in the way of being really good. So no, you're probably not going to use Electroprod all that often and inflict the numb debuff. But that doesn't mean that it's bad, and there's plenty of other things that you can do with it, and if you enjoy that kind of playstyle, you're probably going to want this. Gale says, absolutely going to use as many tickets as needed for Reno's FR. I would actually go out of my way to suggest this banner for newer players too. Ashe and Alize are both great call abilities to pick up for enchanting for various elements all at once, with Alize's in particular being a very strong one at making sure all of their callers' HP attacks will hit their cap thanks to her bravery gains on each hit. It's also a great spot to pick up Charlotta BT if you're particularly after it. Reno himself is quite solid debuff control unit with a rather interesting FR for the fights it works well in. I'm hesitant to say gems here only because I need to plan what events I'd actually use him in, but I think he's worth the ticket, so I've always had him in the pocket for such times as needed. Very true on the call ability front. I think that actually Reno's call ability is really useful as well, particularly if you happen to miss out on Raijin, because the pyramid debuff, if you don't already have it, is very useful. All of the call abilities present here are great. Like, you have enchantment from Ashe, you have self-battery from Alize. If you've got Charlotta BT, maybe that one won't come in as handy as it used to be, and I love using Alize, but I have struggled to find room for her in more recent times. But Reno definitely has a lot going for him in terms of just various applications. But a lot of people don't particularly like the off-turn damage and would like the path of least resistance in terms of bringing your Tidus's and your Camelonauts, etc. And that's perfectly valid as well. If you don't enjoy that kind of playstyle, then you're probably not going to want Reno. It's a very particular thing that he likes to do. And then finally, Sergeant Tuffy says, I'll be using as many tickets as it takes, perhaps pivoting to gems even if tickets are really mean. Reno, much to his chagrin, is going to be spending a lot more time on the job once he finally gets his FR. At least he's going to start earning some major overtime. He is a professional. Reno's one of those characters that has never felt amazing. His LD came out quite early in Lufenia, but never felt essential compared to the likes of Gladio or Rude. Pyramid was nifty, but it often relegated him to a pinch LD call for very specific reasons. His FR finally gives him time to shine, giving him the first FR that enables and encourages off-turn teams and strats. That alone is worth its weight in gold, but Reno's kit even right now is pretty solid. Use him in Odin right now and watch the num debuff completely derail Odin's entire game plan, delaying him to prevent consecutive turn hogging. Reno, for perhaps the first time since his release, is somebody to be actually excited for. This is actually a really solid point. While I sat there and said, you're probably not going to use Reno's for his num debuff or anything like that, that is only true if you actually plan on using his FR. If you're using someone else's, there's no reason why you couldn't be applying that debuff if it's going to be relevant to the fight that you're in. And Odin, as given as a perfectly good example here, is a great place to be using that debuff. Because he likes to take lots of turns in a row, and if you like to break that up a little bit, then num is going to be perfect for you. And not only that, num does run out. Like, if they take that many turns, then it does run out so that you can prepare yourself to use the FR later. Just because, it's a bit of a non-though, it doesn't mean that it's completely useless. So now let's go ahead and ask that big question. Should you be pulling for Reno or Ashe and Alize, perhaps? Now, Reno has a very, very particular branding to his FR. He wants to be letting the enemy take turns. And obviously, if you like your Tidus's and your Camelonauts, etc., you ain't going to be doing that because you're going to be stopping them from getting turns at all. However, if you enjoy that type of playstyle, as I do, the damage that can come off of Reno's FR is absolutely breathtaking under the right team composition. If you're using Galoof, we all know how I love Galoof, Auron, Core, Yang, Gladio later on, loads of off-turn damage dealers, then you're gonna want this. Like, it's absolutely just in your wheelhouse. It's the first FR ability that actually wants enemies to take turns because it increases the gauge on their turns rather than yours, which is when the FR or the force time gauge is not ticking down. So you can turn certain fights, including Reno's own one, into a complete joke and use the enemy's power against them, provided you're able to stay safe doing it. And one of the things that helps you do that is Reno's own Pyramid debuff. So if you want that and you want access to it, it's still a relevant call ability, certainly if you didn't pick up Raijin, and it happens to also come on top of his FR, so more uses of Pyramid, which is fantastic. So it helps him in his role. He is far from perfect. He doesn't actually contribute any damage to his own FR, so like he doesn't have off-turn damage of his own, sadly, so you're going to have to outsource that. And his num debuff is a bit of a non-bow with his FR because it delays the enemies after they've taken their turn, which then means you're going to want to not have turns and make it so they have... You just don't typically use that debuff if you're going for his FR. It has other uses, but if you're using them in those situations, you may not be using Reno at all. And he also doesn't enchant the party for Thunder still, which is kind of annoying considering that one of his FR conditions that does trigger on your turn is to use a Thunder command. So that's going to need to be outsourced as well, or at least brought alongside another character that can deal Thunder damage, so you're getting the most out of it. But the amount of damage you can hit with the ceiling with this FR is really quite staggering. So don't let, I've said it twice, I'll say it again, don't let perfect stand in the way of something that's really good. Is Reno perfect? No. If you build for his FR, is it really good? Good God, yes. Ashe and Alize, they're solid, certainly in their call abilities. Like, Ashe's call ability, certainly very useful across the board for enchanting. Funnily enough, for Thunder and for Holy, so you can use that if you want to help you fuel Reno's FR if you wanted to. And she does some damage now. Her EX is significantly better, having 6 HP dumps and AoE paralysis, and her LD buff certainly helps her deal more damage. And she's generally quite useful with the turn manipulation from Queen's Order as well, and the free skill uses that come out of it. You can make use of just Queen's Order and use her as you always have. Is there any huge reason to go pulling for her? Does she stand out against other support characters? I don't really think so, but that's because when she next comes around, she'll have an FR and a BT that elevate her way more than what she's getting here. And Alize's a nice character. I love Alize. She's one of my favourite characters. I adore her. However, she's like a fast character, but not instant turn rate, so she doesn't go with off-turn damage dealers very well because they're still going to need to take turns. There's not many characters out there that she really does well with, like your Terras and your Tiduses, etc., because they can just take turns continuously, and she can't do that. There's a lot of little bits and pieces, but her call ability is still really useful, and she's pretty much going to be capping every time she does take turns. So that is going to be all for today's video. Let me know in the comments below. Are you pulling for Reno FR? Or are you actually gunning to see if you can make use of Ashe and Alize with their LD kits? Do you have Charlotta BT yet? Are you perhaps looking to get that here? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, as always, don't forget to check out all of my socials like I said earlier. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, and keep an eye out on the YouTube Shorts page for this week. And for every week following, hopefully. It's a big project for me, but I'm really hoping that something will come from it, so keep an eye out for those as well. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I will see you next time, beautiful. Take care.